Okay, so picking up from where I left off, so I was just going to introduce a little bit about the university, and essentially these are some of the top tips or some of the key facts from the university, really. So we're super proud now. We're a top 30 university. It's an achievement that we're particularly proud of, and that's based upon the student experiences, the teaching experiences and things that students have, and some of the facilities and things that we have as well. So including like accommodation. You can see I've basically tried to break it down into different subject areas there. So you can see that we're kind of doing well in quite a lot of areas. But with regards to like this evening, so to try and put it into a bit of context, I like to cover the UCAS timeline. Now, of course, very much on a journey at the moment, so maybe just applied or have already applied and maybe start to get offers, and you'll be able to see how this kind of like all fits together with regards to like not just the UCAS process, but actually how student finance works alongside of that. Then we'll consider like some of the things that need to be paid for, and I'll be largely talking around two main pots of money. And then I'm going to give a bit of a guidance around some of the additional support and things that are available. And again, it's going to be talking quite general. It's not going to be just all about us here at Lincoln, but I'll signpost you to some other resources. And again, if you've got questions around that, about particular incomes, or if it's about like additional funding or support that might be available, again, please do use the chat to do so, to ask those questions. And then I'll talk about the logistics, so how to apply, repaying the loan, and just leave you with some other bits and bobs to kind of like remember. So hopefully what that will do is capture all of those general kind of questions, or those things that I tend to be asked quite a lot when I'm out and about on the road. So here is the timeline. So here we are now. So you've submitted, we're now heading towards that 25th of January deadline. And then early spring, Student Finance England opens for applications. And we're being told already that that's going to be in April. So that's when the portal is going to open. So actually having this talk now is giving you the opportunity to make that preparation. So maybe start looking for like the evidence and considering that kind of thing that they might be asking you for. From a student's perspective, it's important. I would recommend starting to research things like a student bank account, because you'll need that kind of thing, and formal identification like a passport, national insurance number. Those kind of things should be ready to go when you make your application. So as you then fast forward a little bit more, then you'll have until around late May, June kind of time to make these applications. And that's when the deadline or like the guaranteed funding deadline will come about. So what that means is that Student Finance will say, as long as you have made your application within that time frame, then you would be they will guarantee the funding for you for when you start the course. So of course you can still apply from after then, and I do get questions about, oh, you know, what about if I change universities, change my mind, or I go somewhere else? That's all dealt with on an individual basis, and that is possible. So but we always encourage students to make the application as soon as possible, so that then they're in the cycle, and they're being assessed, being reviewed by Student Finance England, and they're going to have their funds ready to go for when they start. So it's kind of alleviates a bit of stress on multiple parties, put it that way. So that's kind of like how it will all fit in. So from this time onwards, you'll start to also be invited to offer holder days, and you might be going, well, you'll largely be going to these probably as a family or as a unit, and that, and kind of go in there and exploring it and think about, okay, which one's going to be my firm and insurance choice? But actually, I still need to make my student finance application. And I always say, like, don't delay making the student finance application, because of course you might be going to offer holidays in February and March. However, it doesn't open till April, and there'll be overlap there. So you might want to crack on with your application. I certainly would do. But if you haven't made your decision by April, it doesn't matter, still just apply, and just choose one of the universities that are on your application for the sake of getting this done, because it can easily be changed at a later date. So now we'll move on and we'll look at the two main pots of money for application purposes. So the first one is going to be the tuition fee loan, and the second one is the maintenance loan. And these are going to be the main two that I'll talk about this evening. So the tuition fee loan, what does that pay for? So that's going to go towards things like specialist facilities that are at the universities, the learning resources, updating software, those kind of things, as well as paying for the academics and things like that. So that's money that would be paid. Once applied for, it will go to the university of choice. Now, the maintenance loan, that again is the pot of money for the student, and that would largely be used for accommodation and a paying for those kind of like life expenses. So it's food, bills, social life, anything extracurricular that might be getting involved in, so join clubs and society, socializing, those kind of things. So, and that money would be paid to the student. So now we'll look at them a little bit more depth. So the first pots of the tuition fee loan. So the maximum universities can charge is up to £9,250 per year of study. Now that means that you can apply for that amount with regards to tuition fees. But you can also apply for part loans as well. So if there's any questions around that, or if you're thinking about doing that, just pop it into the chat. And I know my colleague in that is here and be able to like help out with that. However, you'll see probably by the end actually that due to the way that the repayments and things and actually how they work, you're better off just applying for the full amount anyway. But anyway, it's so what this pot of money is, so it's not means tested and it goes straight to the university. So by not means tested, we mean it's not based on household income or individual circumstances. You just apply for what the amount is, what you want, and then that's what's then granted. With regards to why I like to highlight about straight to university is what that means is there's no worries about, so say your tuition fee loan is paid to the student and then they have to think about, oh, okay, on this date I need to pay that amount to the university and things like that. It's just all done automatically. So it kind of alleviates any kind of other responsibility around it. Now, the maintenance loan, this one is a little bit more complex. So the amount that the student receives depends largely on the three factors I've popped on the slide here. So where they'll be studying, where they'll actually be living whilst they're studying. So will they be living at home with parents, guardians? How are they going to move away to university, for instance? Where they're studying, so will it be inside of London or is it outside of London? As well as then the household income. Now, household income is where parents and guardians here tonight, that's where anybody who's supporting this application, your part is to play. So household income is not just about the wages that come into the house. It could be anything to do with like investments, pensions, and various other things and that as well. So it's worthwhile kind of considering that and checking that out on the Student Finance England websites. They've got some super helpful information on there about the kind of evidence and what they consider income and what they might look at. Then the next point around like bank accounts. So I always recommend that students look at student bank accounts because first of all, you'll need one when you make the application, but actually they carry particular perks. So whether it's like discount cards, rail cards and things like that. So, and they come with like overdraft limits and things like no fees and things like that. So they're definitely worthwhile. They're designed for students. So I recommend doing some research. Long course loans. Now, they are typically for anybody who's studying healthcare based programs. So they tend to be a bit longer just because they have more teaching periods and also like they have the placements as well. So those students are eligible to apply for additional funding as well. And that's something that Student Finance England would be able to advise on as well and grant should they be eligible. So it's worthwhile keeping that in mind as well. And there are various other like funds and things and that as well, which I'll come on to a bit later, but these are the main kind of points with regards to maintenance. So we've looked at how much, what the two pots of money are and what they're used to pay for. Now, this is how much potentially be entitled to based on the criteria we've just been talking about. So, of course, I'm not able to give like lots of individual kind of like, oh, yes, you'd be able to get this amount and you'll get this amount. However, we've generalized it here. So what we've done is we've shown you here, probably for many, many students, many of your children out there tonight are probably going to be studying away from home, but still outside of London. So if that's the case, then they can expect to be able to receive a minimum of £4,605, up to a maximum of 9,881. Whereas anybody who's looking inside London, you can see that for the cost of living down there, we know is much more expensive. So it's going to be very different to like living in the East Midlands. And that's something that's been taken into consideration there. So you can see like there's a rise there with regards to how much is available. However, you know, there's a bit less if with regards to students, if they decide that they're going to live at home, they're going to commute, and student financing, they have the expectation that parents, guardians would be financially supporting them anyway. So they take that into consideration as well. And then based on the previous slide, the amounts, the fluctuation between these two amounts would be based on your own individual circumstance, so how much income and things and that there is. And again, that's done on an individual basis, and then they'll come up with a figure for based on your own circumstances. So here I'll talk a little bit about additional funding. Now, there is a wide range of sources available with regards to additional funding. Now, it's important, I always say, do encourage the students, your child, to talk to the universities of interest, because lots of them will have things like hardship funds and additional scholarships, bursaries, and things like that. Now, these scholarships and bursaries can be essentially it's free money. So we have a University of Lincoln scholarship, whereas if when you're filling out the Student Finance England form, as long as they tick on the form that they're happy for their details to be shared with the institutions, it means that we get a basic overview of the financial situation. They'll make a assessment and they'll literally enroll them into whatever eligible scholarship or bursary that they can get. And it'll just happen. They don't need to make an additional application. Some will need an application, some won't. So again, this is something else to kind of take away from this evening, is have a look at individual websites, university websites, and see what scholarships and bursaries and things and that are available. Now, for anybody who is considering or looking at nursing or midwifery or any of those allied healthcare professional courses, now there is more money available and that for those students, and there is a pot that's means tested and there's one that's not means tested. So, and it's literally a quick Google search. So NHS bursary, it will come up and talk them through the amounts that are potentially available. Now, that can be a really, really great way of supporting your funding, or supporting your studies, I should say. Because again, it's money that's just granted to them. They don't have to pay that back. It's same with university scholarships and bursaries. They don't need to pay that back. Also, any students that are, say, for example, in receipt of the DSA, any other additional learning needs and things like that can be eligible for additional funding as well. And that's something that Student Finance England would provide. As well as, you know, universities can now have their own pots of money and things and that as well to support students. So again, have a look at the individual institutions, look at those scholarships and bursaries, look and see what other local funding and things and that is available, dependent on the course you're looking at. So just to kind of like build on it, in case anybody's in the audience this evening who is applying for any of those allied healthcare professional programs, I've kind of just got a quick slide here that demonstrates some of the subjects that are actually eligible for that funding. So if you're applying for any of these, you could be eligible for that NHS support as well. So it's definitely worthwhile knowing that. So I'll move on. So now I can see there's been plenty of questions and that going on. Please do. Normally now, if I was delivering this in person, I would say, has anybody got any questions, and hands up and things like that. But please do, if anybody has got questions, use the chat. I know Mrs. Roberts and Gareth are in the chat, so feel free to continue using that.
I'll just interject for any of our students who are deferring. Lewis, hopefully, will do a talk for us next year, and I'll put the recording up. So even after students leave MV, hopefully you realise you still can keep in contact with us. So yeah, we'll update if there's any new information. I don't expect much to change, but it's more to do with the amounts. Yeah, but we never know where anything.
Yeah, that's it.
When the government's involved, anything could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, great. No, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so now we'll move on to the logistics. We've looked at all the cash that's potentially available, but now how we're going to get our hands on it. So this is how to apply. So the great news is that it's an online application. So it's very similar to using UCAS in the sense that they'll be asked to go on and register for an account, and it's all managed through an online portal. Also, you don't need to fill it out all in one go. So the great news is that the basic information could be put in, and then when it comes to the evidence base or the more complex part, it will save the progress and you can dip in and out of it. So Student Finance England will release the specific dates soon, hopefully, and it's usually now, and I'll say to parents and students, it's probably worthwhile following one of their social media channels because they are very responsive on there and they communicate quite well, and that's where they'll usually announce it as well as to when they will go live. So it's worthwhile doing that. They can also be, and they were quite good to be honest, with regards to getting in touch with them as well through social media as well. So it can be another communication channel if you've got any like bespoke questions and things like that that you might like to ask. So yeah, so it's all done as an online application. It's done in stages. Like I say, you can save it, but when you come to start, it's just make sure you've got that preliminary information. So things like any ID that they ask for and an account that it needs to be paid into. So having this information now will hopefully give you that preparation kind of nudge, really. So some top tips. Don't rush the application. There's no hurry. You've got plenty of time to get it in. And remember what I said at the start about how they'll guarantee the funding as long as it's in within their time frame. However, the sooner you get it done, they will start making the assessment straight away and then writing to you to confirm. So again, it can get hit off of the to-do list, that kind of off that UCAS journey to-do list. So I'd recommend starting as soon as possible. With regards to evidence, try and provide it all the first time. And what will happen is the student will, so your child will create an account, and then it will ask for yourselves to go in and enter in any evidence in for your part, and it will ask them to enter your email address so that you can then go in there and you'll be able to do your part. So it's worthwhile just keeping an eye out for that. If they do come back to you, communicate with you, and they're asking for additional evidence or something like that, don't panic. It doesn't mean you've necessarily done something wrong. It's just that they might be double checking on something or need a bit further additional information about something. So, and that can be quite common. So don't worry. And everything else we've kind of like reinforced really. So making sure that you don't leave it until the last minute. Don't do what I did. I mean, I won't tell you when I applied because you'll try and work it out. But when I applied, it was all paper-based forms, and my dad is not very technological, very savvy with that kind of thing, and left at the last minute. It all ended up being a right stress try to get it all done. So take it from me, you want to start it nice and early, and it's all done online. But if you do want a paper version, that's absolutely fine. just request it and they'll send it out to you. But just bear in mind, it'll take a little bit longer with regards to processing it. Right, so now we've talked about how much money you can potentially get, how to apply for it. Now, how does the actual repayment work? Now, the good news is that it's a simple process in the sense that it just happens automatically when they become eligible for it through the UK tax system. And the repayments are worked out to be 9% of their earnings over 25,000. Okay, so repayments won't start until the April after they graduate. So say they get to their third year, the summer of the third year, the last year at university, they'll probably then graduate in the September, October time, but then they won't be eligible to start making the repayments until the following April. And Student Finance England will communicate with them about that. Now, they would only start making payments if at that point or at some point in the future when their earnings are above that threshold. If they remain below that or they go above it and then they drop below it, they'll stop. They won't make payments. However, the payments are not 9% of 25,000. It's 9% of what they are over. Okay. And it is a finite payment period as well. So after that period, which is 40 years now, it will be written off. So it doesn't matter how much has been paid off or how much is remaining. So that's how that works. And I'll put that into it. I'll give you a bit more of an example here. So looking at this example, say we're earning £25,000 a year, that works out at £2,083 per month or £480 per week. That's, you wouldn't pay anything from there below that. However, say the salary is 30,000, it's £2,500 per month, but you're going to be paying 9% of what you are above the threshold. So you're going to be £417 over the threshold, and 9% of that will be, well, I'll tell you what, if there's any, is there anybody great with maths on that in the audience? They want to give it a go and throw it into the chat? If not, I will give you the answer. Yeah, £41. Yeah, so literally just under £40. So there are probably phone contracts that are more expensive out there with regards to that, but hopefully it kind of just puts it into a bit of context, really. That, if somebody is earning £30,000 a year, they're actually paying 9% of where they're over the threshold. So paying £37 a month is quite manageable. And then on this slide, what we're doing is, so hopefully that degree should, in theory, progress them through the career ladder. So as they further progress and develop, they should then earn further more and more money. And you can see here, as it kind of like goes up in those stages, how much they'd be paying on a monthly basis. So £40,000, it's just over 100 quid. So again, you're earning more. It's based on how much is being earned, not on how much is being borrowed. So finally then, just some other bits and pieces to kind of like take away, really. Now, just because we get lots of questions around these, now moving universities is fine. Now, if you remember when I said at the start about how if, for instance, a student starts at a university and they want to move, that's fine. You just let Student Finance England know, and then they'll do the necessary transfers and updating the portal and all that kind of good stuff. So I mean, that's fine. Interest, there is interest on the loans, and they start from the first payment. I don't ever quote how much they are, but the interest rates are listed on the Student Finance England website. Credit files. Now, we do get questions around credit files. Now, they should not negatively affect a credit file unless a student defaulted on a payment, which in theory they shouldn't do, because it's automatically processed and taken through the UK tax system. It'd be done through tax returns and things like that if they're self-employed. So it should be just fine. And mortgage applications. Now, they're only taken into consideration for mortgage applications because a lender just needs to know what expenditure is there on their salary. So it's the same for me when I've been looking at houses and things like that. When they've made an assessment, they've taken into consideration my student loan, because they know that obviously that's taken out of my salary automatically. So it's just for the sake of application affordability. It's not because nobody should turn around and say, oh no, we're not going to lend or anything like that based on that. So some of the key points then to kind of like leave you with are, so research all of the support that's available. Now, this can be a really influential part of making decisions over universities. Lots of universities will have great support available with regards to financial help. So it's worthwhile doing some research, look at the scholarships and bursaries. Do they require an application or not? And take my tip for making sure you tick those boxes when it comes to the application process on the portal, that you're happy for that information to be shared, because then that way we can make assessments and award anything that your child might be eligible for. Obviously, it's going to be done online. Make sure you do it on time. I've given you kind of like the heads up here, so now you should be prepared, like you know what kind of thing they're going to be looking for, what the application process actually looks like. And just remember, you don't need to wait for to confirm any offers. If you're still making your mind up, doesn't matter. Just choose one of the universities, the one that you're most likely going to go to, for the sake of making the application. However, if that doesn't work out, you can easily change it at a later date, so that's fine. And remember, you don't pay anything and wouldn't be eligible to start paying anything until you're over the threshold, and it's based on what you earn and not what you've borrowed or what you owe. So we've had a look through the UCAS timeline. We've also considered some of the things that your child will need to pay for at university, whether it's accommodation, food, bills, societies and things like that, and how the tuition fee loans work. We've considered some of the additional funding that's available, including that NHS bursary. It's worthwhile looking into. And then we've considered how to apply, how to repay the loans, how that works. And I've given you some top tips around that as well, some things to kind of like take away from it. Final things to kind of say really is I always encourage students to make sure that the universities they're interested in, or whether they've applied to Lincoln or not, we are here to help, and we're more than happy to answer any questions they might have, whether that's foreigners on our social media channels, or whether it's dropping us an email to the inquiry team or giving us a call. We're more than happy to support with any questions with regards to applying to university or anything else. So whether it's accommodation or how Student Finance England works, and scholarships, bursaries, applications, offer holidays, whatever the case may be. So we're more than happy to help. And that is it from me. So thank you so much for having me this evening. And I must apologise for the technicalities at the start. Don't really know what was going on there, but you know how technology goes. It kind of likes to do an update when it's most inconvenient. But here we go. But hopefully you found that useful. And I will check the chat, but I suspect Mrs. Roberts and Gareth have been checking it. Yeah, by the looks of it, everything's been answered. But please do, like, we are here So if you've got any general questions and things about anything, please do feel free to utilize us. Otherwise, I will hand over to Mrs. Roberts, who I think will probably close the evening.
Yeah, I'll just put my camera back on. One thing I will just add, if you don't mind, Lewis, is students who have special educational needs, including dyslexia, for example, it is really important that they do apply for the disability student allowance. It isn't just medical conditions as you would traditionally think. So the process for that is a little bit more complicated. A couple of students got caught out last year. If they are students that have slow processing skills or dyslexia, they weren't interpreting the emails correctly and realizing they were going to have a video interview, but it is really worth doing. So it's on the standard student file. If you know that your son or daughter does get extra time for their exams, for example, it is really worth filling it out with them. But students have been really well supported for both medical and learning difficulties through that. It isn't usually a pot of money in the same way. It's usually purchasing of equipment. So it could be a printer for them to have in their own accommodation. It could even be a laptop. It could be a reader pen, which I know a lot of our students use for their exams. So that's really worth doing. The other thing that I will just say, and I did say at the beginning, it's really important that you realise as students you have to do it every year as well. Don't get caught out. You do get emails, and by the time you go to university, and we try and do it at MV again, you used to check your emails and things, but you don't want to miss the deadline once you're at uni as well, because that sends your money in for the following year. But I have been through the process as a parent over the last couple of years, so I'm more than happy to help students in college if they've got any particular questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to kind of add there, just because you mentioned about the additional money and things like that. And it kind of reinforced the point that I said about talking to the universities and things. So like we have a dedicated wellbeing team, and universities will have a student support network. So if there are like those processing needs and learning needs, additional needs and things that students have, those are the team that would be able to guide them through any of those kind of processes and things and advise what they're eligible for, and making sure that they've got that support network there, or that kind of framework, the equipment, etc.
Yeah, and we also did a session at MV. We had a great speaker come in. It was in about October time now, a chap called James, did a great session on how to manage their money when they're at university and having pots of it. Absolutely brilliant. I learned loads from him about how to budget successfully. So I will be going over some of that with them just before they leave, as well as little like life skills, so to speak, as part of our PD curriculum. But if anybody hasn't got any other questions, then you're more than happy to leave. And thank you for logging on.
Yes, thank you everyone. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Lewis.